Greetings, members, one and all of the Salivation Nation. Silver supply and demand trends that are coming. Let's explore. Silver has been pushed and pulled around last couple of years, and it's frustrated a lot of us. We talked about that. That's an ongoing theme, it seems like, on this channel when we talk about silver. But nonetheless, that's how complex the silver market is. And in spite of all the natural market forces, I believe there is some credible evidence that leads us to maybe even price suppression. We know there's manipulation that goes on along with all the commodities, but I believe these natural market forces are something that needs to be discussed and to help us understand what's going on with silver, because there's no way, in my view, that silver can be down for so long, for this long, if there's not some extraneous circumstances behind it. Silver has certainly been very stagnant as of late, but it's not as stagnant as it has been over in the last decade. I was here for most of it on this channel talking about it. We're going to be referencing a report here from Sprott that I think is a really good report that talks about the supply trends to kind of watch out for. There's some current outlook for silver. And so keep in mind the source here, Sprott, who is a very large holder of an ETF, the Sprott ETF for silver, which is probably one of the only ones, the Sprott Physical Trust, Silver Trust, that has fully allocated silver. There's something to be said for that, but they are sort of in the business of silver doing well. They want you to invest in their product, which is fine. I think that wherever the truth comes, I think we should take a look at it, but keep the analysis in check, considering where it's coming from. So we're going to look at this article and see exactly what it says and where we agree or disagree. They believe recent market dynamics are creating short-term headwinds for precious metals from a monetary standpoint, and those trends could reverse, and supply constraints are likely to become more relevant in the face of sustained demand, with notable momentum in silver's industrial uses relative to the green energy transition. And we've seen silver's behavior since COVID. It had a 47% gain in 2020. Now, that 47% gain is really an anomaly, because we saw it crash down below $12 an ounce during the rush to the safety of cash at the beginning of the panic. And so I in a sense, discard that figure. Silver traded in a range of between $22 and $28 in 2021, with its average price for the year reaching a 9-year high of $25.14. So that is some good news, and that's really the figure that I want you to focus on here. It reached a 9-year high, $25.14. In other words, that is pretty remarkable, I feel, all things considered. Now, for quite a while, we did see it trade above $30 an ounce around 2012, 2013, after it had reached up into the almost $50 range. But that was an anomaly too, and that should be ignored as well. Since silver's outperformance in 2020, the global macroeconomic environment has changed dramatically and becoming increasingly volatile. Markets continue to grapple with the impacts of the COVID pandemic. Geopolitical concerns have increased substantially, and the recent sell-off of stocks has not yet found a stopping point. Rising interest rates have created a headwind for precious metals assets, particularly gold and silver, at least in the short term. And we know that silver is more volatile than gold, and its current macroeconomic challenges has been to follow the traditional pattern of reacting with more volatility than gold. Silver is down modestly year to date, priced at $23.35 per ounce at the end of last year. It was $21.72 as of May the 23rd, a decline of 7%. Gold, by contrast, gained 1.38% year to date through May 23rd. Both are strong showings, given the S&P 500 declined 16.65% in the same period. And so we can see here silver price versus gold price, and this is a really good chart here to see here. And we can see that big increase from March of 2020 all the way up to August. And that's the oval they're talking about in that previous chart. But typically gold has held its own better than silver during this time. To fully understand their outlook for silver, we should revisit the supply-demand dynamic of the silver market, the fundamental relationship that directs long-term pricing trends. To assess these dynamics, we look to the annual silver outlook published by the Silver Institute and Metals Focused in April, the World Silver Survey 2022. A lot of people reference that. It's a good resource, but keep in mind there's an agenda there too. In reality, I say that, but there's an agenda for everything, I mean, the thing is you have to pick apart and assess these information for yourself and to determine what is valid, what is true, what is being bloviated or hyped up or underscored. Although the risk-off tenor of the moment may be a headwind for short-term silver pricing trends, over the longer term, Sprott believes silver supply constraints will become more relevant in the face of sustained growing demand. I think that's a fairly fair assessment. As expected, on the back of silver's price rise in 2020, silver mining rebounded in 2021, but to a lesser degree than forecasted. Mine production was up about 5% in 2021 from 2020 levels. Recycling volumes grew by 7% as higher pricing attracted more scrap to the market. Metals Focus analysts had predicted growth for mining supply to be higher in the range of 8%. We show in a figure 2, silver supplies have dropped into a deficit since last year, and Metals Focus analysts predict another sizable deficit of 72 million ounces in 2022. So there we go. There's that deficit that they're looking at there. In addition to tighter silver supply, silver grades have been declining for several years. Ore grades depend on several things, including rising silver prices, which makes it profitable to accept lower grades, and how the silver is mined, and by the way, refined as well. Going forward, mining companies will likely have to invest more in exploration and development in order to increase or even maintain supply. And so this is an interesting chart here that shows the grades of mined ore that have declined about 55% since 2005. That is pretty telling indeed to see these here. Average silver ore grade, as you can see, has declined pretty dramatically, around 55% since 2005. Pretty amazing. And look at the silver price from 2005, $7.26 to 2020, $20.67. Ironically, $20.67 is what the price was set by the Federal Reserve for gold before confiscate or before the Executive Order 6104, 1933. That's kind of ironic. Byproduct prices are also a big input for total silver mining supply. More than 70% of silver mining supply is as a result of a byproduct of other metals mined. Think about that for a moment. More than 70%. That tells you higher prices for byproduct metals, lead, zinc, and copper, for instance, drive higher mining activity for those metals, essentially subsidizing silver mining in the process. That is a very valid point here, something I really didn't think about too much before, but that actually is a very good point. That impact has contributed to supply in recent quarters, but it's a tailwind to supply that is potentially at risk. If macroeconomic conditions soften in the medium term and price support eases for those byproduct metals, silver mining supply is also vulnerable. Without the subsidy effect of higher byproduct prices, the outlook for silver supply could be even weaker than expected. But of course, if you're going to see less demand for those other metals, likely you'll see less demand for silver too. And less demand for silver probably means lower prices for silver too. Essentially, that's what's happening now. There's not as much demand for silver because of supply chain issues from COVID. Industrial demand essentially still needs to play catch up. And that's one of the major reasons why silver prices are down. Higher prices for byproduct metals have helped since silver mining output, and put in this graph here we can see copper futures, zinc, silver spot, and gold spot. And so we can see there how these are playing a role there, and everything is kind of up, but silver has been it's been at the lowest of all these commodities in comparison. The price appreciation under 20% of May 15th, 2022. All the other metals are up. Miners must also contend with inflation, which directly impacts their fuel cost in production and exploration. That's something I've been talking about. I'm not seeing many other analysts or channels talk about how the impact of inflation on silver premiums. If costs are expected to increase and silver miners aren't sufficiently confident in higher silver prices, it's difficult to envision a scenario where they're likely to ramp up mining substantially. There are also continued reports of worker shortages in silver mining, as the tight labor market and waves of COVID outbreaks hamper operations in some locations. Those supply trends have already resulted in a drop in global silver reserves. In 2021, 122 million ounces of silver were added to reserves, but 270 million ounces were taken in production. As we see in Figure 5, reserves dropped by about 4% to 3,412 million ounces at year's end. Exploration and discoveries were also underwhelming in 2021. Globally, total identified silver resources, excluding reserves, only grew 1% last year. At that time, there was subdued merger acquisition activity in 2021 in the primary silver sector, with only 8 deals totaling just $11 million. So here we see the global silver mining reserves and how they dropped in 2021. That's pretty substantial here. I would say here as to what could be setting us up for a bullish market for silver in the future here. But hey, and you look at the indicator here. Some of these trends and things like that, we don't know. There's so much involved in the silver market, one cannot really tell. We've been burned in the past making some predictions based off some of these data. What it all boils down to is what is in bold here. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Boy, that's truer now than ever. And especially when you look at a metal like silver, which I don't think we should consider as an investment, at least in a physical form, because you got a lot of skin in the game, especially with regards to the premiums you have to pay to hold it. So green technology supports sustained growth for silver, and I do believe this is true, and this has been predicted at the beginning of this year and last year. While silver supply faces some constricting trends, the rebound in demand could prove sustainable thanks to silver's critical role in growing green energy initiatives. Photovoltaic demand, silver inputs for solar panel production is a prime example, growing 13% of the category in 2021 and contributing to a new record high for global silver demand in 2021. This rebound, even in the face of supply chain constraints that have plagued global manufacturing since COVID began, reflects the substantial green energy investment that is underway. And we'll look at these charts here, but it's not just a matter of the government and initiatives and also legislation and government central planners pushing this stuff. It was happening already in the natural market or in the private sector. And silver industrial demand tops pre-COVID highs with higher photovoltaic fabrication occurring right now. And we can see fabrication and the silver loading here in this chart. And we can see brazing, alloys and solders, electrical and electronics and others, and global industrial demand. Look at that. The highest ever. Both of these here, fabrication, highest ever. Pretty amazing. That should tell us something, that probably the silver market is going to turn around in some way. I'm not saying it's going to skyrocket, but I believe, and this is one of the reasons why I made a very large, well, for me it was a very large silver purchase recently, because of trends like this. Looking at the macro scale and element there, the overall picture of where things are now and where I think they will be in the future. We'll take a look at a few more charts before we close up here. Silver correlates with energy and transition equities. We can see spot silver, the energy transition index. That is a pretty fascinating aspect here too, to see how this is with energy and carbon infrastructure, uranium, and all these other things. And then, it's a large force for silver. And it is amazing how they kind of correlate with each other, something I didn't think about. It's not the primary factor for longer-term silver demand, particularly given its dual nature as a precious metal and industrial mineral. We see energy transition story as a large force for silver demand this year and in future years. The geopolitical issues dominating the current environment only strengthen that trend, even as they weaken other components of silver demand. And so, yes, this is something that's going to continue to see. Electric vehicles is something they have estimated out here on an exponential scale. Look at this. This chart is quite telling. So with photovoltaics and EVs, and I think that's only going to continue to go up. And I think that this chart is quite telling. Now, these are estimates. You never know, but my guess is even if it does kind of level out to some extent, it's going to go up from here. I don't think it's going to go down, barring some absolutely insane black swan event, which could happen. In this day and age, we never keep our mind closed to that type of thing. And then there's some positive non-industrial demand trends. Silver bar and coin investment surged by 36% in 2021. We all know the story there. We're not going to cover this too much more, but we can see that it's getting back up to levels where it was in the mid-2000s when the price was much, 2014, 15, 16, when the price was much, lower, not as low as it is now, but nonetheless, we can see that it subsided. People got tired of silver around 2018, 19, and heading into the pandemic. Now we've got it going up again. So they are bullish on silver. I am overall bullish on silver too. For the most part, I agree with this article. I think they a little bit misleading about their data from 2020 when silver had that anomaly under $12 an ounce. So the 47% is sort of a wash. You can pretty much ignore that in my view. But nonetheless, I think that's quite telling indeed. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I think we're going to continue to see silver perform somewhat lackluster performance this year, but I think within the next year or two after this, we're going to start to see a steady rise up and maybe even some pretty solid spikes along the way. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to you all for taking the time to watch and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.